Welcome back, grade 12 scholars. It's Ms. Novak, and we are in week 8, lesson 35 of your ELA Distance Learning. What can you expect from these videos? Well, first, each lesson is different. Next, we'll always provide you with a list of materials and resources. We'll engage in an overview of the different components of that day's lesson. I'll also make sure to model an activity so that you feel more confident engaging with it independently. And of course, we'll preview the learning for the next day. We are in day 2 of this week, lesson 35. Today's video title is ELA G12W8L35. Yesterday, we engaged in some pre-reading activities. We read about the author and about some background information regarding the text. Today, we're actually going to launch into reading the first half of the text, and we'll answer some questions about that, specifically paragraphs 1 through 29. Remember, after engaging in a first read, we are always going to summarize the text, so that's going to be part of our writing task. Of course, we're going to share our learning with someone today following the lesson. We're also going to engage in our fluency practice, and like we do every day, and sometimes a little bit more on the weekends, perhaps, we're going to read our independent reading book and log our activity in the front couple pages of our packets. Time for a riddle to get ourselves warmed up for the learning today. Our riddle today reads, 2 children born in the same hospital in the same hour, day, and year have the same mother and father, but they are not twins. What are they? Pause the video here, wait for 15 seconds, whichever comes first, and try to solve today's riddle. I'll reveal the answer in the next slide. Tricky. The children are 2 of a set of triplets. Now that is very clever. Very clever and very frustrating at the same time. I did not get this one upon first glance. Hope you did though. Let's get ourselves into today's lesson. What will you need for today's lesson? Well, first you'll need lesson 35, which is on page 115, the note catcher, which is on page 116, the text, which is still on pages 104 to 112, and of course, a pencil, a pen, or a highlighter. Get these materials together before we start the lesson. An important part of our reading journey is always to acknowledge the essential question. What does it mean to call a place home? We also want to be able to acknowledge the guiding questions, the first of which, what makes a place important enough to write about? And of course, in what ways is home both a place and a state of mind? Now, I already read ahead a little bit, so I can definitely say that these factor into play. Keep this in mind as you begin your reading. Our learning target for today reads, I can annotate a text and use key details to determine the narrator's feelings. I love lessons like this when we get into the head of the narrator. Let's get ourselves going. Today we'll start by doing a first read of the first part of My Old Home. Then you'll go back and closely reread a few paragraphs that relate to the setting of the story and the narrator's feelings about it. You'll talk to someone and discuss that same subject, the narrator's feelings towards the setting and his old home. You'll then make sure to capture a summary of those paragraphs that you read and put it inside of your note catcher, paying particular attention to maybe some grammar today. Spice it up a little bit. And of course, you'll end the lesson by answering a few key questions about the text to make sure that you're ready and grounded to progress in the story. Let's review some of your first read experience. Your reading task today is to read paragraphs 1 through 29 of the text and to engage in those first reading steps. Keep in mind, if you have the Bounce Pages app, you can actually have the text read out loud to you, which might be helpful for you as you take notes. Please make sure to underline any words or phrases or points that jump out as important. Next, circle or box words or phrases that you're unfamiliar with that you might have to look up afterwards. And of course, in the margins, make sure to note down any reactions or opinions or questions you might have about the text. They are there for a reason. Let's pause the video now, take some time to engage in a first read for paragraphs 1 through 29. Now, there's a lot to read about in the first part of the text, especially because the narrator is going back into his childhood memories to describe the first time that he met Juntu, right? So let's take a look at paragraph 29, the final paragraph that we were reading. And I want to take you through some of my annotations that I made for this particular paragraph, especially because it had a lot of stuff in it that I think will lead us into a deeper understanding of the rest of the story. So first of all, the author starts out with unfortunately. From here, I gather that this negative transition means he doesn't feel so positive about the events that he's about to describe. Next, these lines really hit home. It was almost like this vivid scene that he brought us into. I burst into tears and he took refuge in the kitchen, trying and refusing to come out until finally his father carried him off. Both boys were extremely sad that they were going to be separated. Like over the course of this short period of time, the long walks they had with one another, they really formed a bond. And last but not least, but we saw one another never again. The last line of paragraph 29. It's so pivotal here because this actually is the last time that both of the boys saw each other, even though they talked about him going to visit him later on and at a later date, it hasn't happened. I have a feeling that's what we're about to get into in the second half of the story. Now remember, your annotations might look different than mine, and that's absolutely fine. The important thing here is to interact with the text and to make sure that you pick up things that you feel are important to your understanding. So hopefully you can take some time to review your annotations to set yourself up for success for the next activity. Now it's time for some close reading. So I know that you just reviewed your annotations from your first read, so you feel really prepared for this next step. What I'd like for you to do here is to reread paragraphs 1 through 6. And I'd like you to mark the words that describe the physical appearance of the narrator's home. Next, perhaps in a different color, highlighter maybe, I'd like you to mark the words that describe the narrator's feelings towards his home. But I'd like you to capture those feelings about his home when he was a child and the same home now 20 years later. Just so that we're clear, I'll engage in a quick model in the next slide so that you feel confident moving into this exercise yourself. I'm going to engage in a quick model of close reading paragraph 4. Then you can go back to paragraphs 1 through 3 and 5 and 6 for your own close reading efforts. Not to mention close reading of paragraph 4 as well, because remember, all of our annotations are different. So to start ourselves off, I'm looking for the author's feelings, and I captured the first few lines here. The old home I remembered was not in the least like this. My old home was much better, but if you asked me to recall its peculiar charm or to describe its beauties, I had no clear impression, ... The author here remembers his home as being better than what it is today. He's almost in this like weird thinking space, contemplative really, but why he can't put his finger on it. He's almost taken aback by his own reaction. And the last few lines, home was always like this, and although it is not improved, still it is not so depressing as I imagine. It is only my mood that has changed because I am coming back to the country this time with no illusions. Really important because this paragraph is really nicely bookended here. So here he notes, the home really hasn't changed that much. It's not that it has gone into a state of disrepair, it's the same home that he grew up in. But because he has been to other places, seen other things, he's cultured, right? A world traveler, his perspective has changed ever since he's moved away from home. And that's really what's changed, not the home itself. It's interesting to note. Take some time, pause the video here, and engage in your close reading efforts of paragraphs 1 through 6. Now that you've completed your close reading, let's talk about the thinking component of today's lesson and your talking component. What I'd like for you to please do is to think about the words that you marked in paragraphs 1 through 6 and answer this question in your mind. How has the narrator's feeling towards his home changed over the years? And why do you think it's changed? Then I'd like you to take a look back at the unfamiliar words that you circled and try to look for context clues in the surrounding sentences that may give you a clue for the meaning of that word. So basically what I'm trying to say is don't immediately go to your phone and look up the definition or go to a dictionary, but actually try to uncover the meaning of the word first for yourself using just context clues, and then fact check using your phone or using a dictionary. And last, please talk to a friend or a family member, a caregiver, about the narrator's changing feelings about his home. I love this opportunity as well to talk about your changing feelings about your home, maybe theirs. Pause the video now and take some time to complete these steps. Welcome back. The last part of your lesson now is all about your daily writing. You actually have 4 parts to complete today. So first, you'll start by writing a summary, 3 to 5 sentences of paragraphs 1 through 29 of the text. You'll capture this in your note catcher. Now remember, a summary is an objective view of what's gone on in the text so far, so that someone who picks it up is like, all right, I know what this text is about. Your opinions can be left out of it. Next, I'd like you to answer these 3 questions about the text. You might turn back to your close reading annotations because I almost guarantee they will give you these answers. The questions are, what is the narrator returning to his old home for? Why does the narrator's home look different to him than it did 20 years ago, even though he says that his home is basically always like this? Remember, we just talked about that. And why is the narrator's mother somewhat sad when he returns home? Right? Remember that paragraph? I'm trying to put it in my mind, but she greets him, she gives him tea. Why is she sad that he's returned home even though she should be in a way happy? Again, use your annotations from your close reading efforts to complete these activities in your note catcher. Pause the video and take some time to do that now. Remember, if you are stuck on any part of today's lesson, feel free to reach out to your teacher for help. It's their first name, their last name at DetroitK12.org. I'm sure they'd love to hear from you. Tomorrow's learning target, as always, lesson 36, can you believe it? Reads, I can use details from the text to answer questions. Again, pretty straightforward in nature until we get down to really analyzing the nature of the question. So make sure that you're primed, fresh, and ready to go for tomorrow's lesson. Here we are at the end of this day's lesson. Thank you so much for learning with me today. Here's a couple of quick reminders, as always. Make sure that you're talking about your learning today with someone at home or a friend over the phone. Doesn't matter. Just make sure that you're bringing to light those items that you discussed today during your learning experience. Remember, we're going after subjects of friendship, of leaving home, of having a new view of a situation now that we're a little bit older. That can really open up some deep discussion. Next, make sure that you're reading for 20 minutes a day, right? You don't need to necessarily set a timer. Sometimes you'll get lost in the book, especially if you enjoy it. And lastly, make sure that you are practicing your fluency. Here's a weekly tip. Tuesdays are actually reserved for reading the passage twice or making your way through that 60 seconds of reading and seeing how much that's improved from yesterday. Just something to think about. Make sure you capture your activity in the first couple of pages. We'll see you tomorrow for the next lesson.